Welcome back to the channel and another broadcast. I'm really pleased to have been joined today by Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'm Ashley. I'm a recovered drug addict calling from Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Really glad you're here. Ashley, thanks for joining us today. So today what we've got is 3 topics each from the big book, which is called Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're not spokesfolk for CA, we're just folk in recovery and carrying the message. I just want to say that on this channel there's now over 130 podcasts, which are substantive, that you probably benefit to listen from. You can pause, rewind, fast forward, share, like, subscribe and comment on these videos at any point. If you'd like to appear on one of these podcasts with your personal story or doing what me and Ashley are doing, let us know in the chat. Wherever you see this posted, you can comment underneath and reach out. There are most CA networking now. In fact, virtually all of it takes place on WhatsApp. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of CA groups on WhatsApp that are very, very healthy, where there's loads of devotionals about sobriety and staying clean, encouragement, readings, and meeting links posted every day. So if you listen to this and you're not in any WhatsApp recovery groups, put your first name and your number below where you see this and just put WhatsApp group and we will add you. Also, we do maintain current male and female sponsorship lists. So if you're here and listening to this and you're looking for sponsorship, just put your first name, number, and put sponsorship list, and we will send it to you privately on WhatsApp. And yeah, there's loads of free resources we can send to you. So once again, on this Cocaine Anonymous YouTube channel, there are over 40 different personal stories where men and women share for half an hour their personal story of sobriety, their journey to freedom. And there's podcasts on each of the steps. There's 2 on step 1 and 2 on step 4. There's podcasts on each of the traditions. So there's a whole range of nutritious information and truth on this channel, folks. So yeah, so have a look and get involved. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to Ashley. And what page is your first topic, Ashley? I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, hi Paul. Thank you. Yeah, my first page is 407, and at the very top it says acceptance was the answer. So yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a recovered drug addict calling from Cambridgeshire. But yeah, I'll start the chapter then. So acceptance was the answer. If there ever was anyone who came into AA by a mistake, it was I. I just didn't belong here. Never in my wildest moments had it occurred to me that I might look to be an alcoholic. Never once had my mother even hinted at the idea that when I grew up, I might like to be a president of AA. Not only did I not think that being an alcoholic was a good idea, I didn't even feel that I had all that much of a drinking problem. Of course I had problems, all sorts of problems. If you had my problems, you'd drink too, was my feeling. My major problems were marital. If you had my wife, you'd drink too. Max and I had been married for 28 years. When I ended up in AA, it started out as a good marriage, but it deteriorated over the years as she progressed through the various stages of qualifying for Al-Anon. At first, she would say, "You don't love me. Why don't you admit it?" Later, she would say, "You don't like me. Why don't you admit it?" And at her disease was reaching the terminal stages, she was screaming, "You hate me. You hate me. Why don't you admit you hate me?" So I admitted um I admitted I remember very well saying there was only one person in the world, woe's guts, I hate worse than yours. And those are my own. She cried a bit and went to bed. That was the only answer to the problems that she had left. I cried a bit and then mixed myself another drink. Today, we don't have to live like that anymore. Max hadn't gotten that way because I didn't care. Indeed, he seemed that I cared too much. I had sent her to 4 consecutive psychiatrists, and not one of them had gotten me sober. I also sent my kids to psychiatrists. I remember one time even the dog had a psychiatric diagnosis. I yelled at Max, "What do you mean? The dog just needs more love. You tell that dumb cat and dog doctor he's not at Beverly Hills for psychiatrist. All I want to know is, why does the dog wet in my lap every time I hold him? That dog hasn't wet my pants once since I joined AA, and neither have I." The harder I worked with Max, the sicker she got. So when it ended up at a psycho ward, I wasn't all that surprised. But then when that steel door slammed shut and she was the one that went home, I truly was amazed. I'd begun to drink in early years of a pharmacy school in order to get to sleep after going to school all day, working in the family drugstore all evening, and then studying until 1 or 2 in the morning. I would not be able to sleep soundly with everything I had been studying going around in my head. I would be half asleep, half awake, and in the morning I would be both tired and stupid. Then I found the solution at the end of the study time. I would drink 2 beers, jump into bed, sleep real fast, and wake up smart. I drank my way through schools, always got honours, and I went through pharmacy school, graduated school, medical school, internship, residency, and spectacularly training. And I finally went into practice. My drinking kept increasing, but I thought it was because my responsibilities were increasing. If you had my responsibilities, if you needed the sleep like I do, you'd drink too. I'll leave it there then, Paul.
Well, did you want to share on the reading?
Yeah, I'll share back on that. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, from what I got from that sort of part of the chapter, going into the other parts of the reading there, it started off saying, introducing the fact that if anyone was to come into AA, I get the idea that, like it says at the top, acceptance was the answer. And, I think it's sort of briefly telling us in so many words that, if we, acceptance really is the answer, because, there's a solution around the steps. And and this is what I believe that's being spoke about. There's a positive outcome within all of this work that we do, around the 12 steps and helping others and attending regular meetings, and it's all part of the deal, I guess. And yeah, it's a real, I've come across it a few times, and it's always been in the forefront of my mind. Acceptance was the answer. So if I've come across any issues, I guess I've always looked at that part of the book to kind of look at, what's going on for me around what I think I should do. But it's nothing really to do with that. It's, I think we practice about handing it over and, looking at some meditation and working with others once we've gone through the step work. And that for me is kind of what it's all about, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Yeah, great reading, Ashley. Yeah. Yes. What I would say is self-pity, self-obsession, and self-medication. They're like bedfellows. And we can see here that in this here reading, the person, well, it says here he was a physician. At the top, it says he prescribed drugs as a doctor, but then he decided to start prescribing for himself, which is what a drug addict does, or whatever the drug of choice. A drug addict is self-prescribing, self-medicating. But this chap was a professional prescription doctor for folk, and so he obviously had access to all kinds of stuff. However, the story goes on to indicate that alcohol was a key feature. And self-pity said, if you had my problems, you'd drink like I did. So justification, rationalization, minimization, and maximization, a distortion of perceptions. That's what addiction is. Yes. So he shares about his wife and how there was problems in the relationship. She screamed that he hated her, and he admitted it. He says, "Yes, I do hate you." And then he says, "There's only one person I hate more than you, and that's me." So there was terrible marital problems through drunkenness, and then of course there's more arguments, and it's unusual. I've come across this exact thing before, where persons have problems with the behavior of their pets, and it's almost like God's trying to reach them through the circumstances. It says here that the dog would wet in his lap when he was in a mess, but since he sobered up, that never happened. And it's almost like circumstance was saying to him, "Look, you're living wrong. Sort yourself out. Sort your head out." But no, that's a great reading, Ashley. I'm thankful you brought that this morning. Really honest, great bit of the book. So my first topic today is page 40. So let's just find out where we are. So, in this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I'd not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington, to a government bureau. I felt physically fine, had no pressing problems. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day. Not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel, leisurely dressed for dinner, across the threshold of the dining room. Thought came to mind that it'd be nice to have a couple of cocktails, or a few lines, or a couple of spliffs, or a quick hit, or a go on the bong. A couple of cocktails with dinner, that was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail meal, and then another one. After dinner, I went for a walk, went to the hotel. A highball would be a great idea, so I stepped into the bar. I remember having several more that night, and plenty next morning. A shadowy recollection of being in an aeroplane bound for New York, friendly taxi outside landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I'd made no fight whatever against the first drink or the first drug. This time, I'd not thought of the consequences at all. I'd commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic addict friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic addict mind, the time and place would come I would drink or drug again. They'd said that though I did raise a defence, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink or a drug. Well, just that did happen and more, for what I'd learned of alcoholism and addiction did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic addict mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I'd never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Two of the members of AA came to see me. They grinned. They asked me if I thought myself alcoholic addict and if I was really licked, really done this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic addict mentality, such as I'd exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction, of assurance that I could do the job myself. They then outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Being a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow, but the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I'd have to throw several lifelong ideas, conceptions out of the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic and addict condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I've since been brought into a way of living, infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange it, its best moments, for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it, even. Would you like to share on that reading? I'm happy to pass it over to you, Ashley.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Paul. Yeah, thanks. Ashley, recovered drug addict. Yeah, thanks for the reading, Paul. That's a brilliant part of the book. I remember reading that when I first came into the rooms. Where it sort of goes on to saying that he went into a hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. And then it then goes on to say, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal, and then I ordered another cocktail, and then after dinner I decided to walk. Um, I think for me, I think it was, it's all that, like what's been mentioned, but it's that delusion of thinking that it'll be all right to have maybe one, and then I can leisurely walk back and everything's going to be all right. And it's a very it's a very sort of big part of the book. And that was, I guess, my story. I got off the train early enough to realize that there is a solution around this problem that I was coming up against quite a lot. It started off minor, but then, as we all know, it becomes a problem and it starts to affect, family life. And, if I wasn't thinking about doing it, I was doing it, and that was a real problem for me. So I was presented with, a solution, and it didn't, it wasn't an overnight thing. It took me a while to get, to kind of get to grips with what I was up against. But it's just again, going back to the acceptance thing, it's an acceptance thing around, I'm all right with being in recovery, because it's the deal. It's what's required of us if we want to live a sustainable kind of contentment sort of life. And it's just a very very good part of the book. And just as Paul's scrolling down, I noticed a few more things where it then goes on to say that they had said that through I did raise a defence, it would one day give before some trivial reason for having a drink. And I think that kind of explains it all in a nutshell, really, that one day that thought will come to me, and I've got to raise a defence against that. I can't, and I think it was becoming apparent to me that I couldn't kind of like, pick someone out my pocket and ask for help. It was all, I think there is some kind of accountability within our own individual sort of parts within this, and then obviously tapping into this power that, is God or whatever people choose to come to believe. And it's very powerful, because it can it's a powerful thing to be a part of. And the mental blank spots, as it's been highlighted there, that's another big sort of topic that's obviously spoke about in the rooms and in recovery. Because everything's going all right. As it says in the book, there's not a cloud on the horizon, but there's always going to be one day I don't know when it will happen, but there was always one day for me where that thought would hit me, and I'd have no, as it says, I'd have no mental defense and the strange mental blank spots, and I was really kind of confused around this. But I think it's all to do with just being sort of like being in a place of just having enough and wanting to know something different, rather than X amount of people telling you need to stop. And it's got to come from yourself, I believe. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thanks very much.
Well, I'm going to go to your second topic, Ashley, for you, which is A Vision for You, page 151. And you're back on again. It's over to you.
Right, brilliant. Cheers, Paul. Chapter 11, A Vision for You, then. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and a colourful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good, but not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an instant yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from the life itself. As we become subjects of King Alcohol, a shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapour that is loneliness settled down. It thickened over, becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find an understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily, we did then would come oblivion, and then the awful awakening to the face, the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. Now and then a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself inwardly. He would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He would presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without. Then he will know loneliness, such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. We have shown how we got out from under. You say yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum? Like some righteous people I see, I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it's vastly more than that. It's a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus will find the fellowship, so will you. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your community near you. Alcoholics are dying helplessly, like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich, poor. These are the future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new wonderful ties. For you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbour as thyself. I'll leave it there, but I'll share back on that. Thanks for letting me read that, Paul. That was brilliant. So yeah, A Vision for You, chapter 11. You know, that's a very, I believe anyway, but a very kind of vital part of the book for me, because it really kind of describes, I think it's just basically describing everything that I was questioning around recovery, but it's basically telling me the truth around what I thought was a lie, but isn't a lie, obviously. And it's given us some really clear-cut direction within that chapter around, you know, where it says companionship. Drinking means conviviality, companionship, and a colourful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. You know, because I think for me, again, going back to my sort of story around this, and probably many others that have come into the program as a newcomer, you know, that was it for me. You know, I was drinking because I didn't like the way I felt for some reason. Although I had, you know, although I still have, and I, you know, but at the time, I, you know, I had everything going for me, like what it mentions in Bill's story, previous chapters. But, you know, lovely car, wife, house, all these sorts of stuff. But then all of a sudden, I'm getting a feeling of that I don't like myself, and it's this internal kind of suffering, as it's mentioned, or it's mentioning in A Vision for You, that I just wanted to escape that feeling of discomfort, whatever that, you know, whatever that meant for me at the time. And, you know, A Vision for You, I believe, was that for me. You know, I couldn't understand, you know, why I was doing it. And I think it's, you know, forgetting about the, you know, the money, prestige, and property, but looking at the facts of reality and becoming a part of the way that it's describing in here, because that's what I still have to remember today. You know, it's not about, you know, the money, prestige, and property. It's about facts, figures, reality, and getting a pen to paper and looking at this stuff and becoming humble and kind of, you know, I still like the fact that I don't know, you know, I don't know this stuff, but then if I kind of did try and work it out, I think that's kind of dangerous for me. I guess it's just being like, you know, just being teachable around it all for me is what I've kind of learned about this. But yeah, it's a very big sort of captured part of the book, as I've said earlier. But it's, you know, it's just, you know, I think it's just telling us that, you know, that there is a vision for you, you know, and there is a, you know, it is something that we can be a part of. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thanks.
Without vision, people perish. You've got to have hope. You've got to have desire. You've got to have encouragement, assurance, and comfort. Yeah. So drinking and drugging for most folks begins out as a great laugh. You know what I mean? Great experience, happy. You're with, you know, everything's going well. You've got your best clothes on. Perhaps you're out and about. You feel like it's just the thing, you know, and you're there with your pals for hey. But for many alcoholic addicts, they end up using in isolation with the doors locked, the curtains closed, with financial problems, emotional problems, mental problems, physical problems, marital problems, industrial problems, and their viability as a going concern as a human reduces drastically. You know, their ability to be a romantic partner reduces or disappears. Their capacity to be an employee or employer reduces or disappears. Their capacity for rational thought, their freedom from fear and confusion diminishes. Yeah, and it talks there well known. And then the persons think that they can manage it themselves. You know, that they'll get clear on their own power. And then the four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And the common bond of addict alcoholics is the pain of active addiction and the joy of recovery, the joy of sobriety, of course. Yeah, so it's a great reading. Is that. Now, on to my next topic, Ashley, which is here. Two. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring her way through the lives of us all. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking or a woman is unthinking when they say sobriety is enough. They're like the farmer who comes up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. He says to his wife, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand? The wind has stopped blowing." Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the remorseful mumbling that we're saying won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyse the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticise them. The defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator shows the way of patience, tolerance, kindness. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behaviour will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness or addiction would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them on this letter. There may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we won't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. So, yeah, when someone gets into early recovery, Ashley, it's often the case that they're like, right, everything's fine now, I'm doing great. And their family's like, hang on a minute, you've made a right mess of things. What you're talking about, everything's great. Everything's not great. And sometimes when persons get clean and sober, as far as they're concerned, everything's okay now. But that's not how the family afterwards see it, and so it does take time. Yeah. Just one moment, Ashley.
No, that's fine.
Yes, hearts are broken, relationships are dead, and it's a long period of reconstruction to rebuild a relationship, the family life, particularly after low bottom addiction. And so prayer is the secret to ask God for patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. And it's a design for living. It's a 12-step program. It's a way of life. If it's not a lifestyle, you might not have it for long. And the thing is about getting clear of drugs. It's then learning to steer clear of the sinful nature or the spiritual malady. Separation from God. The steps are about getting close to God, drawing near to God, and staying near to God. That's what the steps and program is about. And by that, you're free from the lower power, the unseen force of wickedness. You're free from that bondage to self, bondage to addiction through connection with the higher power. It says here, the lifestyle of an alcoholic addict before they sober up makes a skeptic very often of family members. They don't believe that they're going to stay clean and sober. There's a certain dignity about recovery when a man or a woman gets right with God, when a man or a woman changes their behaviour by the grace of God. There's a certain righteousness, there's a certain strength, there's a certain victory, there's a certain establishment in God's power and God's grace, and they can learn to live as an honourable person again. I'll pass it over to you, Ashley.
Yeah, that was great, Paul. Thanks very much. Into action then, that's a powerful part of the book, as Paul has described, really. It's like what's been shared, it's getting into that, once we get into the steps and we learn a thing or two and we listen to the guy that's taking us through the work, the sponsor, and we start going on meetings and we start attending regular 12-step work and you know, looking at inventory, I think it, you know, like as it says, you know, into action, it's a, you know, it makes us become accountable again for, you know, some actions that we weren't once were not accountable for. You know, and it's, you know, you know, if we're going to say we're going to do something, I think we have, you know, we tend to stick to it. And, you know, like what was said, you know, about the family, and, you know, that, you know, I think it's a harsh thing, but, you know, half the time that, from, you know, just from my experience again, but they're kind of not really that concerned. That, you know, I think it's more action, less talking, from my experience anyway. Around where, you know, around the interaction stuff, and, you know, rather than sort of saying, oh, I'm doing really well, I'm in recovery, you know, I think the reality on the ground for me anyway was that it, you know, it wasn't a nice sort of remark, but it's to be you know, I think it's to be expected, but it's, you know, like it says, it's getting into some kind of action based work, as it says for us to do within this part of the chapter, to become, you know, I guess a productive member of society again. And, you know, and being like honorable to what we're doing. And, you know, it's not easy. It's still, you know, it's still a work in progress for, I guess, for a lot of people, but it's just the act of, I think, doing it and being willing to show some kind of, you know, actions around that, you know, as it says, going into step 10, you know, continuing to take personal inventory, you know, and that's something that is a big part of it, you know, and as well as all the steps, to be honest. But yeah, it's a very powerful part of the book, and it kind of opens up things that yeah, that we should look at, really. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thanks.
Lovely. Okay, I'd like to read the promises before we go to your
Yep.
last topic, which goes like this. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door upon it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit the folk. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realise that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. For these extravagant promises, yes, they are. It's God's extravagance, God's extravagant loving kindness, goodness, and truth. But in terms of them being unlikely, oh no, these are all likely. They're being fulfilled amongst us. It's happening. All these promises, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Now, Ashley, over to you for your topic.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, Ashley, recovered drug addict. Chapter 2, there is a solution. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved their drink problem. We are average Americans, all sections of this country, and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship of friendliness and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers off a great linear the moment after a rescue from a shipwreck, where the camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having a shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can joy in brotherly harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and we have to come to believe it is an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, or all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes an annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all woes, lives, touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgust, friends and employers, warped lies of blameless children, said wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who may be affected. There are many highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us, have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That the man is making the approach has had the same difficulty that he obviously knows what he is talking about. That his whole deportment shouts out the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever expect the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees, no pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are conditions we have found most effective. After such approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us make a sole vocation of his work, nor do we think effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that the elimination of drinking is but a beginning. And I'll leave it there and I'll share back on that. Thanks for letting me read, Paul. Yeah, so there is a solution. You know, I think it's basically hinting to us that, you know, if anyone's new listening to this, you know, welcome, and, you know, you're in the right place. But, you know, I think it's, you know, telling us that there is a solution, you know, no matter what we believe or what we think or what we try to get out of our own lives, to get out of the addicted mindset. You know, I think that's where it's beginning to become you know, paramount for me, that I thought I'd make up my own solution around getting out recovery, but it, you know, like it says, you know, I could go and see a doctor or a really well-trained psychiatrist around addiction, but, you know, within their own no-faultness, you know, they actually, you know, they can't really help me around this. And I, you know, this is why I had to be involved with the 12 steps and listening to really kind of like knowledgeable guys that had been in this a while, that I really wanted to, I wanted to be, I wanted to listen to, and that was for me a start of a solution. Listening to really kind of passionate guys that were around before me, and they were sharing a message of hope, faith, and courage, and it was something that really pricked my ears up around this, and that was, like I say, that was a part of a solution for me, because it was getting into some, good ways of thinking around, things. And then all of a sudden, once the solution was presented with me, I start finding myself becoming a part of the norm, or the normality of whatever that means for everyone. But you start to become a trustworthy human being again, without sort of saying, going back to what I was sort of saying earlier, without kind of reeling a list off of what I'm doing. It's more to do with like the actions around how I'm, like not just me, everyone, like how I'm talking, how I'm acting, how I'm preserving myself, because it's all these things that I believe recovery can give a person if they want this. It's all, no one's sort of, holding you hostage to this. It's all, I think it's a choice that individual has to make. But as I've gone on with this through the years, it's all worth it, because if ever I'm finding myself again going back to that non-solutional mindset, the recovery's giving me the answers I need to become a part of the solution again. And that's really where it's at, is finding a solution, tapping into a power greater than yourself, and restoring that sort of warped way of thinking into some kind of sanity again. And it's just, where it says, it's just an amazing part of the book. Where it says, we are average Americans, all sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic and social, religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix. It's just little things like that stuck out for me. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Paul.
Lovely. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so in 12-step recovery, we have identification in the problem and identification in the solution. That is to say that you'll often hear people tell your story. If you listen and go to enough meetings, you'll hear folk repeat what your experience was. And of course, you hear lots of other experiences where every addict is completely different in terms of quantity of usage, frequency of usage, duration of usage, in other words, how long they've been doing it, drug of choice, and of course, personal circumstances. Every alcoholic addict is completely different. And yet, every alcoholic addict is exactly the same: dysfunctional thinking, distorted lifestyle. That was a great share, by the way. And we live to use, used to live, ways and means to get more, and eventually the whole life and thinking becomes centered in drugs in one form or another. Do you see? And then folks arrive at the jumping off point where they can't imagine a future clean, and they can't imagine a future continuing to use. Well, God's permanent address is wit's end corner. God is there, all powerful, all knowing, all seeing, whether that for you is the Lord Jesus Christ, whether it's Allah, whether it's Jehovah, the Spirit of the universe, higher power, the Father of eternity, the Creator, the Redeemer. You have to realize there is a Creator that's all knowing, all seeing, all powerful. Now, we see this word here, recovered. Recovered. Now, the word recovered appears, I think it's over 100 times in the big book, in the first 164 pages, whereas the word recovering only appears twice. So I truly believe that a man or a woman goes through a 12-step process and they become a recovered man or a recovered woman completely free. I don't think they need to see themselves as part of a cultic system of things where they're obliged to think or talk or behave in a certain way. I think they become free and their accountability is to God, period. What do I mean by the word? Well, you hear all kinds of definitions. I like to keep things very simple, Ashley. For me, recovered means that I no longer obsess about acquiring alcohol and other drugs. Therefore, I don't acquire them. Therefore, I don't ingest them. and I'm recovered. I don't obsess about them, therefore I don't get them, therefore I don't take them, period. And I'm free. We become free. We become a free man or a free woman through the process. And, as it says here, they have solved the drink problem. They have solved the drink problem. You have solved the drug problem. And I think it's that straightforward, actually. Then you've got to get busy living. You've got to think about education, you've got to think about your relationship, you've got to think about your health, your future, your finances, etc., etc., etc. Now, what I want to talk about next was the fellowship. The fellowship is an essential part of the program. It is not the program. It's a huge part of the program. It's not the program. The program of action is things like morning devotions, nightly inventory, developing, maintaining, participating daily in a sober network, reading spiritual literature daily, reading devotionals on recovery daily. It's being available to help others in this process. It's good self-care. It's going through a round of the 12 steps in the first instance, and then ideally helping others through the steps. That's what the program is. And the fellowship, the meetings are a very important part of that. But there are some folks out there that think the meetings are the program. If they just go to a few meetings, they'll be fine. And maybe some are, but how long they are for remains to be seen. But it's a bit of a dangerous game to play because it is a progressive fatal illness. And whilst I like to hold hands and kumbaya, an addict dies every 6 seconds of this problem of addiction. So recovery is a commitment to the lifestyle. It's only a living, transparent, accountable relationship with the Creator, with God, with the source of all life, that's going to keep you clean and sober in the long run, just as your next breath comes from God. No human lives or breathes without God. Everyone lives and breathes as a result of God. And the whole program is about getting connected to God. So what we've got is a common solution, a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from addiction. Now, an illness of this sort, now it is an illness, but it's a potentially dangerous one-word explanation of this problem. Why? Because many an addict justifies their drinking and drugs and say, well, I'm ill. No. You need to grow in understanding and effectiveness, folks. It is a physical and mental illness that involves selfishness and foolishness. That's exactly what addiction is. A physical and mental illness that involves selfishness and foolishness. Now the steps are very politely and wisely worded to help arrogant alcoholic addicts recover. The steps don't say, right, you're going to have to get right with God. You're crazy. You're all over the gaff. You'll lead an insane lifestyle. You'll have to get right with God. You'll have to sort out what you're feared up about. All these folk you're angry at, you're going to have to forgive a load of folk. You're going to have to figure out all your character defects. You're going to have to ask God, the Creator, for power and deliverance from yourself. You're going to have to make amends to a load of folk. And then you're going to have to live righteously from that point forward. The steps do not say that. Not a lot of folk wouldn't do them if they did. They're very wisely and politely worded to help folk that are in a bad way. And it talks about powerlessness and unmanageability. See, so it comes at it from a very gentle perspective. And meetings and the program is about cleaning up addicts and sobering up drunks. There's a lot of folk need outside help from psychiatry and medicine, things that are available. Having a personal relationship with the Creator is at the essence of this program. These steps are footsteps towards God, they're footsteps with God, so you can learn to walk with God, so you can stand as a free recovered man and a free recovered woman, divinely sustained to serve others. And God has other people in view with your sobriety. Now that does conclude proceedings for today. So I want to just put something up on the screen. Firstly, I want to just say thank you to Ashley.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, great topics. Thank you.
Yeah. Now on the screen, you're very welcome. It's been great hearing you. Really good. Now on the screen right now, folks, is a list of meetings. Now this screen is very epic. Bear in mind you can pause, rewind, fast forward, share, like, subscribe, comment on this video at any point. You can also take screenshots, and this is a really good one to take a screenshot. All these meetings are on every single day on this screen. Now, me and Ashley are often found at a very healthy meeting that's on 3 times a day, every day. We get over 25,000 folk a year through the Zoom room, and it's on at 2 p.m., 8 p.m., and 9:30 p.m. every single day all year round. And that's the idea at the top. It's called We Can Recover. But all those other meetings are on every day as well. The UK Samaritans number is at the bottom right, as is the CA UK helpline. Once again, we do maintain current male and female sponsorship lists. So if you're looking for sponsorship, let us know in the chat, or you want to be added to some WhatsApp groups, or you want to appear on the podcast, or you want to comment on anything me and Ashley have shared as individuals, feel free to do so in the chat. So without further ado, once again, I appreciate you taking time out of your life, Ashley, to be here.
No, that's great, Paul. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah, once again, thank you.
All right, family, stay safe, stay strong, more prayer, more power. The solutions in the literature, in the steps, and the program, and the fellowship, and in God's loving kindness.